Hello, I'm Matthew, and today I'm going to be making
vegetarian breakfast. Now we're making.
To make this dish, you will need 1 pound of whole radishes, 2 large potatoes, 1 bell pepper, a bunch of fresh green onions. This recipe calls for 2 eggs per serving, and also goat cheese for garnish, but I couldn't find it. In addition to all those ingredients, you'll also need olive oil, butter, and salt and pepper. To actually cook this recipe, you will also need a knife and cutting board, a large baking sheet for the potatoes, a large frying pan. You could also use a small frying pan, but I'm going to do everything in the same pan. You'll need a spatula for that, and a bowl and cheese grater for your radishes. And finally, you will also need a stove and an oven. Now that we've gathered all our ingredients and tools, let's get started. First things first, you're going to preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And while the oven's heating up, we're going to prep our vegetables. First, we're going to give all the vegetables a nice rinse and a nice dry. Now, you don't have to be as meticulous as I was, but I did dry every single radish. Yeah, dry everything. And then you're going to grate the radishes like cheese with the cheese grater. You're going to want to hold it from the stem side and grate down and then throw away the stems. Grating takes a long time, especially a whole pound of radishes by yourself, so I just decided to start dicing them. It's best for this recipe to use the cheese grater, but if you don't want to use the cheese grater or you don't have a cheese grater, you can dice them and it still works. Next, you're going to dice the potato into cubes that are about 3/4 of an inch big. Now, obviously, you don't have to be exact. You just want them to be small hash brown-like cubes. And then you're going to put them on the baking sheet because that's going to go in the oven later. Now, of course, it's time to dice the bell pepper, but first you got to remove the stem, cap, and seeds. You just throw that away and then dice the bell pepper into similarly sized cubes. And you can put those in the bowl with the radishes because we're going to saute those together. And last but not least, green onions. Obviously, measurements don't have to be exact. You're just going to cut them into small rings while holding them together in a bunch. Now that all our produce is cut, it's time to start cooking. But there's one more step we have to do with the potatoes before we stick them in the oven. So you're going to spread them out on the baking pan, and then you're going to drizzle olive oil over it. And for maximum olive oil coverage, this recipe does recommend to toss the potatoes to make them as crispy as possible when you bake them. And finally, we can season the potatoes with a little bit of salt, just drizzled over top, and a little bit of pepper. Once you've done that and your oven is preheated, you can go ahead and slide those bad boys in there. You're going to leave them in there for about 40 minutes or until they're golden brown and tender. In the meantime, we can get to sauteing. You're going to put your large frying pan on a burner on high, and then don't make the same mistake I did.
Should have added the butter and melted the butter first.
Put 2 tablespoons of butter in first.
I'm silly. I didn't add the butter.
So you can add 2 tablespoons of butter. After you melt the butter in the pan, then you can dump your radishes and pepper into the pan. And you're going to saute that until the radish loses its moisture and begins to turn brown and crispy, so about 15 or 20 minutes. And you can also season this with salt and pepper. I don't have footage of it, but you're going to sprinkle the salt and pepper over much in the same way you did with the potatoes, kind of just a general sprinkle over everything. You know, not too much, but enough. And after your radishes get brown and crispy like this, that means they're done. And now we can do the eggs. If you want to use a second pan, now is its chance to shine, but I'm just going to do it all in one. I pushed the radishes over to the side and then poured a little bit of oil and about half a tablespoon of butter. And you want to be careful when you're grabbing your eggs not to let your spatula fall between the oven and the counter. After the butter is melted, you're going to crack your eggs and drop them in the pan. But
That was embarrassing.
crack them first before you drop them in the pan. I'm cooking mine sunny side up, so I'm going to saute them for about 3 to 4 minutes until their whites are set and their yolks are runny. And don't make the mistake I did. Don't forget to salt and pepper your eggs. It's not the worst thing in the world if you forget, but and it was right about this time that my potatoes were finished cooking, so I took those out of the oven.
Yeah, those are good.
Now it's all coming together. My eggs are about done, so I'm going to go ahead and give myself a serving of potatoes and scoop out some radish and peppers. And those eggs have been sitting there about 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and their whites are set and their yolks are runny, so I think it's about time. I forgot to season my eggs a little bit. Now that I've got my nice bowl, it's time to garnish. So I'm going to sprinkle some green onions on there. And if you had goat cheese, this is where you'd put it. But I didn't. Now it's time for the moment of truth. Right from the first bite, my thoughts were, oh wow, that's really good. So, final thoughts. Really good. The end result of this dish was a really tasty and healthy vegetarian breakfast option that I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did. That being said, however, it took me about 2 hours to make, start to finish, with prep and all, which is kind of a long time if you're cooking a large meal by yourself and just want something quick to eat. But if you want to invest your time, it's a great dish to make for meal prep, or even one you might make with friends. It's not super challenging, so if you're not super experienced in the world of cooking, but you've got a spare couple hours and want to give it a shot, Andrew Campbell's potato and radish hash with eggs is a good place to start.